Welcome class, Jeff here. Today we're talking more about latitude and longitude and how we can use them to find a location on a globe. So earlier in the week we talked about how latitude are these horizontal lines that stretch from east to west or west to east across the globe. Now these horizontal lines are a measurement. What they do is they measure this distance here. They measure the distance from the equator, which is that line that's right in the middle. It's kind of equal, right? The equator is equal. It splits the world in two halves. And the further away from the equator we go, kind of the bigger the number is. So you can imagine this number here if you measured from the equator here all the way to the top, see the distance there? That's kind of a big distance. And if you just measured from here to here, that would be kind of a small distance. So we can actually measure that distance. These lines are little markers, kind of if you can imagine like a ruler that has these little lines on it. These lines measure the distance from this middle line, the equator. And we measure them in degrees. The symbol is the same as the degrees that we use to measure temperature, that little tiny circle. And they start at 0 here at the equator, and they get bigger the further up you go. And we actually do the same thing with longitude. So the prime meridian, which is that big line that's kind of around the corner here, that's 0 degrees, that's 0. And then the further we get from there, the bigger this number gets. I'm going to show you some examples of what that looks like here. So if we look at a picture of Minnesota, we can actually see these lines. We're going to see this grid. This grid looks a lot like the grid that we saw in our last week's activity, where each grid has a number. But this is the way that we use this grid on a globe. So you'll notice that each of these lines represents a number. This one's 98, this one's 96, this one's 94, counting by twos, 92, and 90. And 0 would be way over this way at the prime meridian. And we can do the same thing here. So imagine the equator is way below us because Minnesota is pretty far up north. And as we count up, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, as we go up, the numbers are getting bigger as we get further away from the equator. If you got all the way up to the North Pole, you'd get all the way up to 90 degrees. So that is latitude and longitude. We can use them together to find locations.